So I've always been a fan of the Metaspeed Sky, but in the past it's been more of a preference for the kind of 10K half marathon and never quite the full marathon for me. But luckily the new Metaspeed Sky Paris changes that. It has a brand new midsole design, new foam, a lot of big changes that help make this a great marathon racer for me. Just a quick disclaimer that ASICS did provide these shoes to me for the purpose of review, but all my thoughts and opinions are my own. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the specs. The stack height is 39.5 millimeters in the heel and 34.5 in the forefoot with a 5 millimeter heel to toe drop. The weight comes in at 6.4 ounces. The price is still $250. And I put this in the Super Shoe Racer category. Let's go ahead and dive in and talk about what's new in the shoe in the shoe overview. Starting with the upper, it gets upgraded to Motion Wrap 2.0, which is material that is more breathable, lighter, and less plasticky feeling. The midsole gets redesigned to be more stable in the heel and uses a new foam, Flight Foam Turbo Plus, which is lighter, softer, and bouncier PIBA formula than before. The carbon plate also gets widened in the forefoot. The outsole is very similar to the previous versions, but uses a tweaked ASICS grip formula to be a bit softer. Moving on to the fit of the shoe, I got my standard men's size 12, and I thought it fit great, thought it fit true to size. I had no problem with lockdown, no heel slipping, no rubbing, plenty of room for my toes to splay out. I think if you do like maybe a more snug racing flat type feel, you might try going down half a size, but for me it fit perfect true to size and had a pretty similar fit to the Metaspeed Sky Plus if you've tried that shoe. Let's go ahead and talk about the ride of the Metaspeed Sky Paris now, and I think it's a huge improvement. So before in the Metaspeed Sky Plus, I thought it felt really great when you're going at race pace, but if you're doing something like a fartlek where you have the downs in between your ups, so you're going at a slower pace, it could feel a little awkward going heel to toe just because it had a pretty skinny heel and then that bulbous large forefoot, and it almost felt like a negative drop at times. With the completely tweaked midsole here of the Metaspeed Sky Paris, that I haven't had an issue with that at all. Yesterday, in fact, I did a fartlek, and on my in-between reps, when I was doing kind of a recovery jog, it felt really smooth from heel to toe. I didn't get kind of that awkward transition. I think it really helps with that heel flare here, and I'm glad they fixed that. It makes the shoe much more versatile in my opinion. Another thing to mention, of course, is the new foam. The Flight Foam Blast Plus Turbo is definitely quite noticeably softer and bouncier. With the previous versions, I felt like I kind of had to break in the foam to get it to be a little softer, a little bouncier, and that is not the case here. This shoe feels even bouncier than my most broken in Metaspeed. So I'm glad to see this change, and actually reminds me quite a bit of kind of like the latest Zoom X in the Vaporfly. I mentioned they did widen the plate a bit in the forefoot as well, and I think that that helps really to compress that foam and give you a nice bounce back. When I was doing workouts at marathon pace, this shoe felt very snappy, but also very controlled. I didn't feel like I was running on stilts or the foam was too bouncy, bounced me all over the place. So I thought it was a very well balanced shoe. So I personally had no issues with the Motion Wrap upper on the Metaspeed Sky Plus, but I do really enjoy the upper here. They made it a little more flexible, more breathable, a little less scratchy and stiff that some people thought the previous one was. Yet, that being said, it still kept me nice and locked in. Couple things I will say though is I feel like the laces are a little bit short, especially if you do use this extra eyelet. I can barely double knot them, and again with using that extra eyelet, I find that the tongue is barely long enough to protect me from the laces. But those are just a couple minor things. Overall, the ride of the Metaspeed Sky Paris is more balanced and more lively than the previous models. Alright, now let's go ahead and do a few quick comparisons here. The first shoe I'm going to go toe-to-toe against is the last year's model, the Metaspeed Sky Plus. So like I said, there is a big difference between these shoes. the Motion Wrap 1 upper versus the softer, kind of more flexible Motion Wrap 2 upper, the more balanced out heel-to-toe transition from the midsole shape of this shoe. This one used the regular Flight Foam Turbo, which was a little bit firmer. This one uses the much softer, lighter, bouncier Turbo Plus. That being said, though, they do both have that same kind of later staged rocker in the forefoot and those flatter carbon plates that are closer to the top of your foot. That being said, though, I would definitely pick the Metaspeed Sky Paris over the Sky Plus. It's lighter, it's bouncier, it's more comfortable in my opinion, and I would definitely, if you liked this one, I think you'll probably still like the Paris, but overall this just checks all the boxes for me. Next up is the Alphafly 3 from Nike. So both these shoes have very lightweight minimal uppers. They both use PIBA based foams. They have a flatter plate that is closer to the top of your foot, and they have similar rockers to them as well. And honestly, these are both really good shoes. These are probably my top 2 marathon picks at the moment. Like super close, like a tie. It's really hard to choose between the two. I think one of the biggest differentiating factors is that the Alphafly does have a wide base, which makes it nice and stable, and then just the unique air zoom pods give you that nice bounce in the forefoot that's hard to replicate. Though I will say that the forefoot of the Metaspeed Sky Paris is quite bouncy, and it's probably the closest replication of the Alphafly's forefoot feel that you can get without having actual AirPods in there. So I did really enjoy that from the Sky Paris. The Sky Paris is also lighter than the Alphafly 3 if you're concerned about that. Overall, I don't know if I can pick one at the moment. They are both solid. There just kind of depends on your preference. Next up is Nike's other racing shoe, the Vaporfly Next% 3. And again, they both have PIBA-based foams that are pretty similar densities in my opinion, and minimal uppers. I think one of the biggest differences between these shoes is just the rocker geometry and the plate geometry. So the Vaporfly is going to have a more aggressive scooped plate that goes closer to the ground, opposed to the more flat, closer to your foot plate found on the Metaspeed Sky. And then the rocker is moved a little further back in the shoe compared to the Metaspeed Sky. That's a little more forward. So for me, I personally really like the Vaporfly for 10K up to half marathon races with that kind of more aggressive geometry in my opinion. And then I like the feel of the Metaspeed Sky Paris for those full marathons. But these are both really great, lightweight, fast shoes, and just kind of depends on your preference. Next up, I haven't tried the shoe, but I know a lot of people are going to ask about how the Metaspeed Sky Paris compares to the Metaspeed Edge Paris. And they're almost identical, and they're pretty much the same weight. I think there's a couple grams difference. They have the same stack heights, the same foam, same upper, all that. The main difference is going to be the rocker geometry and the plate geometry. So it's actually going to have a very similar plate and rocker to the Vaporfly, where the rocker's moved a little further back and that plate scoops down closer to the ground instead of your foot. And I think you can't go wrong with either shoe. It just kind of depends on you as a runner and your preferences. ASICS recommends the Sky for those stride runners that when they get faster, they increase their stride, versus the Edge for cadence runners that when they go faster, they increase their cadence. And I think it kind of goes along the lines too. If you're more of a Vaporfly person that has preferred the Vaporfly in the past, you'll probably like the Edge more. Or if you're an Alphafly person, you will probably prefer the Sky more. But that's just kind of a quick little comparison list for that. So just by the name, the Metaspeed Sky Paris might sound like just a different colorway and not a full makeover, but I guarantee that this is definitely a full-on V3 of the Metaspeed Sky with its much softer, bouncier midsole, much lighter weight, the more breathable, flexible upper, it does have quite a few upgrades and makes it a much better shoe in my opinion than the previous versions. Probably my favorite Metaspeed to date. This is actually probably one of my top marathon racers at the moment as well. It's comfortable enough to get you through those long miles, but it's also snappy enough to get you to your next PR. So I have some races planned this summer and I plan to use this shoe on them, and I'll give you my full review on how it performed in those races. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep on running.